kind invitation also to participate on the panel. Let me answer that question by reference to, I prepared a presentation. Only some parts of that presentation are relevant to answering the question directly, so I'll try to go to those parts that are the most relevant. Let me start. First of all, it was a very interesting presentation, and certainly the key points that are made match up with what would be international good practice in terms of the protection of investment, in terms of the key principles underlining and the guarantees de jure that exist, right? The guarantees that exist in the law. And then, of course, as with any place, any country, there may be differences between what the law says and what happens in implementation, and that is something that we see in many different places. But let me first set a context, and that is putting yourself in the shoes of a foreign investor. What are the kind of things that foreign investors look for, and what are on the other side, the flip side of that coin, what is it that the government should be thinking about, any government, when considering attracting foreign investment? And there are three principles that we have on the slide here. The first one is investment policy that government puts into place is not so much about choosing between foreign investment and domestic investment, but it's very much about linking up domestic to foreign. And that's because foreign investment has certain attributes. For example, foreign investment typically, or foreign businesses are typically linked into global value chains, which means that they're part of the international production process, and domestic investors usually can become a part of that international process by linking into foreign investors. So that's why it's not really a question of choosing between one or other kind of investor, it's trying to link the two. And governments need to bear that in mind when they're considering their policies on investment generally and also on protection specifically. It's also not a one-off transaction. Bringing a foreign investor to any country, it's not about attracting them and then forgetting about them. It's about maintaining a relationship that's going to ensure that the investment prospers, grows, and creates all of the linkages to the local economy that it can, and that it's best placed to do. And part of that, of course, is the system of protection within the domestic legal system of the economy, because the protection part of it is what contributes to the competitiveness, the national level competitiveness of the economy, and makes it attractive for foreign investors to come here in the first place. And thirdly, the key principle is not all investments are the same. So not all types, there are different types of foreign investments. Some would come here because it's efficient to produce and to export from here. Others would come here because of the natural resources, so not so much for the export part. Others would come for the local market. So the different types of investments should be reflected in terms of the policy that the government puts into place. And this, I was really pleased to hear His Excellency talk about the investment cycle. We think about the investment cycle, and there are different elements of that, and at each element of each part of the investment cycle, government has a role to play. And here, there are 5 points around this cycle that I have up on the next slide, and if you'll see, it goes from vision and strategy in terms of investment to attraction, which a lot of the presentation that His Excellency made was about the attraction part, the incentives, the fiscal incentives, but also the non-fiscal incentives, the financial incentives, the administrative incentives such as one-stop shop and so forth, and then also the establishment, which is also the one-stop shop, how complex or otherwise it may be to start and run a business and operate a business. The retention part is where the protection comes in. What's the legal framework like for the retention of the investment? If something goes wrong, how quickly can a dispute be dealt with? What are the guarantees in place and so forth? So just in terms of context, I think, as I said in the beginning, protection is very important, and it's not just, it's a global issue. So 25% of all foreign investors we're talking about here either withdraw from an existing investment or cancel planned investment due to a variety of risk concerns, political risk concerns. This is a global issue. This is not just a an issue here. So, and the way to address this is through the law, but also through the administrative processes, because we know that competitiveness comes from, or comes at three levels. Right? So there's the national level competitiveness, which is reflected through the legal framework, but there's also sectoral competitiveness. Certain sectors are more competitive than others in countries. And finally, there's competitiveness at the firm level. Certain firms will be competitive, whereas others will not be. And the overall framework is set, the government has a role to play in each of these three areas, but particularly in the first area, the national level competitiveness. And this is through the legal framework, which we've mentioned, through the international obligations that the government signs up to, and also the ability to settle disputes in a timely manner. I just wanted to quickly touch on this dispute question a little bit more and just point out again that this is a global phenomenon, especially in relation to disputes under bilateral and multilateral treaties. So as you can see on this slide, the number of disputes, this is primarily coming from BITS, bilateral treaties, globally, is really increasing very quickly. And one of the reasons for that is that it's a function of the pure number of bilateral treaties that are being signed between countries. But clearly there is a growing issue in terms of investor-state disputes. And the question then becomes, how do you deal with these? Part of that is through the legal mechanism that's in place. And the other part is also through better coordination within government, picking up these issues before they become disputes. And so one thing that my group works on is helping governments think about how they can deal with grievances before they become disputes, and that's what this slide is about. And an important component of that resides at the provincial and subnational level in understanding the grievances of investors before they become disputes and addressing them through mechanisms like aftercare, through investment promotion agencies that are dealing with foreign investors on a very frequent basis, that remember the fact that there is an investment cycle and that in that cycle it's not just about attraction, but it's also about retention, because more than 50% of new investments within any country comes from existing investors. It comes from reinvestment. It doesn't come from new investors coming in. So this is why retention is very important. This is why the protection element is very important, and managing grievances is very important. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое.